My second medieval pastry is Pynite, pine nut tarts. Now these are rather luxurious. Let me show you how I make them. First, you need to make something called gingerbread. Now forget modern cakey versions. Instead, think of taffy or toffee. Rather typical of medieval cookery recipes, there are no instructions given on how to make the gingerbread in the Pynite recipes, neither in the Anglo-Norman French original nor the Middle English translation thereof. Luckily, there is a late 14th century medical recipe for gingerbread, which does give quite a detailed recipe. So, following it quite closely, though scaling down its quantities, I put 300 milliliters, 1 1/3 US cups, of runny honey into a small saucepan and bring it steadily to the boil on a medium heat. I keep stirring this until it reaches the soft crack stage on a sugar thermometer. That's 135 degrees Celsius, 270 Fahrenheit. When it reaches the soft crack stage, I test the mixture by dropping a spoonful of it into cold water. As you see, it forms a stiff, though malleable mass between my finger and thumb. With the heat now off, I add my spices. 1/4 teaspoon of finely ground black pepper, and 2 tablespoons of ground ginger. This is quite a lot of ginger, but it's meant to have a kick. Mind you, were I following the ratios in the medieval medical recipe, I'd be using 3 to 4 times as much. Though this probably says more about the way ginger lost its potency in its long journey from India to England than it does about the practice of 14th century physicians. I pour the honey into a buttered Pyrex dish and leave to cool. After about 15 minutes, with buttered hands, I gather together the honey mixture into a lump. I work it by stretching it and folding it back on itself, and keep repeating this process. In the medieval recipe, the honey is stretched around a wooden pin bored into wood. It's done 10 times or 12. I work my honey taffy until its colour changes like Christmas magic into a golden hue. I cut the gingerbread and work it into long, thin sausages. Then I cut these into small pieces. Make sure you have some greaseproof paper to cut them onto. These are now ready to use for the Pynite tarts. If you are preparing the gingerbread ahead of time, you can either wrap these pieces individually in wax or sweetie papers, or place the mixture into plastic containers lined with greaseproof paper. The gingerbread will likely level out overnight into the shape of the containers. To make the pastry, which the medieval recipes say should be made with chestnut flour, naturally gluten-free, I take 60 grams, 2/3 of a US cup of chestnut flour, 60 grams, a heaped 1/3 US cup of rice flour, a pinch of salt, and sieve these into a mixing bowl. I take 6 large egg yolks, weighing about 120 grams, and beat these. Then I make a well in the flour and add the yolks. Using a fork, I incorporate the yolks well, before using my hand to draw the pastry dough together. In case you're wondering, I do not use any other fat but egg yolks in my medieval pastries, as there are no medieval English recipes that specify using animal fat, such as lard or suet, or butter, to make pastry. However, eggs or egg yolks are specified in some pastry recipes. And I find this ratio of flour to yolks, equal weight for both, works really well in making both a robust and tasty pastry. And yes, the pastry of these little tarts was meant to be eaten. I then knead the dough on a floured surface for about 1 minute. I then leave it to rest in the fridge for 10 minutes or so. Once rested, I roll out the pastry dough thinly. This amount should comfortably make 12 shallow tart cases. As you can see, though the dough is heavier than modern short crust, it is nevertheless quite easy to work with. I bake the pastry cases blind for 10 minutes at 180 degrees in a fan oven. That's 200 degrees in a normal oven and 400 Fahrenheit for US viewers. Once baked, I cool them on a cooling rack. Next is the wonderful filling. In my pan is 100 milliliters, that's 5 tablespoons of dry white wine, and 50 grams, about half a US cup, of dark muscovado sugar. I bring this to the boil, reducing the liquid by about half. I melt into the syrup 150 grams, about 5¼ ounces, of my gingerbread. I add 2 tablespoons of runny honey. And another teaspoon of ginger, which has been ground with 4 cloves. I heat this then to 120 degrees Celsius, 250 Fahrenheit, stirring constantly. Once there, I turn off the heat and stir in 200 grams, about 1½ US cups, of pine nuts. Working fairly quickly, I spoon in about a dessert spoonful of this gorgeously sticky pine nut mixture into each pastry case. Do pack the pine nuts in. Once cooled, I shower half of each tart with a mixture of ground ginger and castor or superfine sugar. They deserve it. Well, I
I feel ready for Christmas now that I have my medieval pastries. It only remains for me to wish you all a safe but sweet and spicy Merry Christmas.